Hey, this is Sam from Shure. In this video tutorial, I'm going to talk about user groups, a feature built into Wireless Workbench 6 to help you globally restrict all of the frequencies the calculator calculates to a specific range. Wireless Workbench does a lot in the way of frequency coordination. It's built with a lot of different features to help users all around the world make sure that their wireless systems are tuned to compatible frequencies in their RF environments. And in order to make that process as easy and as streamlined as possible, we wanted to make sure that users that operate in markets or in regions where only certain bits of the spectrum are allowed have a convenient way to find frequencies in those environments. Now, by default, when you fire up Wireless Workbench and you coordinate frequencies, there are no limitations placed on where the frequencies for your particular devices can be coordinated. And by that I mean, if you consider the inventory I have right here, or the sets of frequencies I have right here, PSM 1000, Axient Digital in the G band, whatever bands of these devices tuned to. So, in the for PSM in the G10 band, that's from 470 to 542, and for Axient Digital, it goes from 470 to the low 600s. When Wireless Workbench coordinates frequencies for these devices, it takes into consideration the entire tunable bandwidth of each of these systems when trying to find compatible frequencies. And that's the case for all of the systems we coordinate for. Whether they are Shure systems or third-party systems, it doesn't matter. We don't apply any constraints to those frequencies. Now, that normally is a good thing if you assume that all of the spectrum that your devices operate in is legal and allowable for those systems to utilize in a particular region. Now, depending on where you go, that might not always be the case. So I'll give you an example. Let's say there's a touring musical act that starts in the United States and then goes overseas to a stop in Australia, let's say. The laws and the governing bodies that regulate how spectrum can be used in each country differ. And as a wireless operator that's going to be using these wireless systems, it's really critical that you make sure you're not out of compliance regardless of where you operate. So in order to help our users stay hip to this stuff, we've built in a feature called user groups. And user groups are a tool that universally limit all of the frequencies that Wireless Workbench will calculate to a specific range. Let me show you a little bit more about how this feature works. So within the Frequency Coordination tab, to use user groups, you really start the same way as you would without them. You make sure that the frequencies you want to coordinate are listed there. Then here's what I'd like to do. Let's say we are in Australia and I want to limit all of the I basically want to make sure the only spectrum that Workbench considers is spectrum that is legal in Australia or in any country of your choosing. And this is probably the main use case for the user groups feature. If I go to this inclusions section down below in the Spectrum tab, that's where our user groups feature is accessible. I can turn this feature on by checking this top checkbox under user groups. And then we've got sort of two categories. We have built in a number of user group lists, and they happen to correspond to country names, because when you select one of those country names, we've listed a set of groups that correspond to frequency ranges that are permissible in those particular countries. Now, we update these every time we update a version of Wireless Workbench, and given how turbulent and changing spectral environments are across the world, these may be a little bit out of date, so definitely refer to your own country or your own region's regulatory rules when being certain you're compliant. But for an example, let me just select Manage here and I can show you the contents of these groups. Each of these groups has a specified set of frequency ranges. So if I select Australia Indoors, you'll see if I expand this, there are 3 allowable frequency ranges, and here they are. And if that's outdoors, those ranges might differ a bit. Now, again, these may be out of date if Wireless Workbench is out of date, but the important thing is you can either pick one of the user groups that we've applied for these particular countries, or you can create your own if for whatever reason you want to limit all of your frequencies to fit within a certain range. So user groups are another example of inclusions, which is to say selecting a particular user group forces all of the frequencies that you're going to be coordinating to be included within that range. So what I want to do is I'll select Australia, the user group. And actually, before I do that, I want to just show you really quickly, when I calculate all of my frequencies for PSM and AXI digital in these ranges, these frequencies take up the entire tunable bandwidth allowable by these particular systems. There's no constraint on them. You can see that by the general area that these frequencies fill up. Whereas if I were to turn on this user groups feature and apply this Australia indoors range, you'll notice this yellow bar appears in the spectrum, and that's my user group being visually overlaid to show the allowable range of frequencies that these systems can use. And you'll notice every subsequent calculation that I do ensures that all of the frequencies I coordinate fit within that yellow range. And I can calculate as many times as I want, but you see every time frequencies are only being placed in these particular ranges. So I just wanted to, make sure it was understood that user groups, when you use them, they apply to all frequencies. All I needed to do was turn on user groups, and you see the user group list, and the group that I've selected is shown here, and now that constraint applies to all frequencies that I've coordinated. User groups are a really great way to specify the allowable spectrum you wish to use for a certain coordination, and the easy part about it is you set it once and it's applied to all frequencies. If you are looking to apply certain spectrum rules to certain channels, you probably want to check out the inclusion groups feature, and we've got separate videos on that. Those will allow you to specify certain spectrum ranges to individual channels on a channel-by-channel basis. So I hope this tutorial was helpful. It gives a high-level overview of how this feature works. If you like this topic and you want to see more videos like it, give it a thumbs up down below to let us know we should keep working on videos like this. And if you've got questions or comments, please be sure to leave a comment down below. Thanks.